Thank you for joining us wherever you are. This podcast episode is brought to you by the Old Ways Actual Play team. This actual play uses the 7th edition Call of Cthulhu tabletop role-playing game rules by Chaosium. This actual play is performed by adults and in an adult setting. While we try very hard to stick to language for all ages, listeners should know that this podcast may include mature themes. All content, including names, places, events, companies, and etc., that may bear resemblance to entities living or dead, is strictly coincidental. My name is Michael Diamond, and for tonight's game, I will be your keeper. Thank you for joining us again on another episode of the Old Ways Podcast. I'm your keeper, Keeper Michael, and we return to Horror on the Orient Express, where we are traveling around the countryside near Trieste, not in the city any longer, because we've, with our investigators, moved just slightly outside to our best friend Anton's house. And so at the top of the show, as we always like to do, we would like to thank our listening audience and our Patreon supporters. If you would like to join them, you can do so at patreon.com/theoldwayspodcast, where we can happily support the wonderful players and the show as you continue to listen and enjoy. And so we're going to start with introductions, which will begin to my right.
Hello, I'm Mike, and I'm playing James Robert Fraser, and getting ready to go to some underground caves. No, not those underground caves, some other underground caves.
That is correct. One's just slightly further along. And to his right.
Hi, this is Rena. I play Lady Elizabeth Fitzroy, and I have a shiny.
Indeed you do. You have somehow found a very particular and important medallion. It has become very precious to you, and I'm certain that you'll defend it with your life. At the end of the table.
Hi, this is Giles, and I'm playing Simon Griffith, and I can tell you for sure that Simon's not going back into any caves without Mr. Thompson.
You know, I think that's a fair choice that you'd be making, although I will be interested to know how you'll get Mr. Thompson along with you for that cave exploration you're going to do. I'm sure you'll have a fantastic answer soon enough. To Mr. Griffiths, right?
Hi, this is Miranda, and I play Maggie Bellinger, and my only hope is that I exit these caves with the same number of holes as when I went into them.
I think that's a reasonable hope and dream. We'll see if we can fill you with any other holes. Last but most certainly not least.
I'm Martin, and I'm playing Richard Courtney. And the only holes Richard is avoiding are the ones in his trousers.
You know, I would just say to you, Professor, don't bet on it. So we raised the curtain tonight just outside the city of Trieste, where their friend and farmer, potentially, Anton, has left them an open and usable home for them to shelter in after picking up a medallion in town and sneaking their way back. And they've compiled some of the list, some of the informational clues that they've gathered along the way here, and they have placed one potential site that still needs to be investigated. And that would be the Grotta di Postumia, which is outside the city itself. And so we will begin play in Anton's house. Now, this would be, roughly speaking, about mid-afternoon when our characters appear back. And so you've collected the amulet. Lady Elizabeth seems to be seemingly somewhat attached to it, although that's probably more physical than it is from any noticeable perception. But I guess I would ask to you, the players, what preparations are you making? What any other clues or discussions you're having?
Do we know if this is a similarly touristy cave as the one we were previously in?
From what you know of it, at this point, you would assume, given that it's a grotto and given that it's an extensive cave system, stuff that is talked about in city as being one of the draws to Trieste, you would imagine it's a tourist destination. They probably, much like the caves not far from here, have guides, have an entire setup that will take people through. This is what brings tourist money into this area. The thing to keep in mind, especially about Trieste, is beyond being a shipping port, the local economy very greatly requires the subsistence from tourists. And the war broke up a lot of that. But now that the war has been over for several years, they're really rebuilding what they have here. And that would definitely be with some of the money that they would gain from tours of these caves.
Just out of character, I've got a note from last session which says Maggie goes upstairs and, unless I can't read my own writing, which is quite possible, finds book relating to preparations for caves. Does that make any sense to anyone? Ring any bells? This is at the house where we found the medallion.
I don't know. Was it a book or a journal of some sort?
So you found a journal, one that had spoken and seemed to be written by Winkleman himself, that sort of divulged that this was a place he had used to pick up and keep his sort of secret lifestyle going.
Which is what has led us to determine that we have to go back into a cave.
Yep.
I guess the question is then, do we want to travel out there soon and perhaps be forced to spend the night in the caves? Or do we go in the morning and get out before the caves close?
Well, I suppose the question that goes along with that is, do we want to travel with other tourists through the caves? Or do we want to try and get around them a little more discreetly?
I would say it's probably better to go in without being noticed by a whole lot of other people, considering the circumstances we're currently in. Staring at Mr. Fraser.
Aye.
Also, the sooner we get things taken care of and get out of Trieste, the better.
Now, the journal that I have in the description of the caves, is there a description at all or drawing of perhaps a back door the caves we can go into? They are extensive. I would assume there are a number of entrances, and Maggie's always fond of a back door trip.
I mean, you would have to obtain a map of the cave system or some sort of geographical representation therein. Simon obviously would have some sort of experience, and he could speak to the cave systems in general, but he would need much more detailed maps to be able to make some sort of, we'll just say, best educated guess as to what the cave systems would have in it. The other thing too, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you do, you have a map of the city of Trieste. I know you do. But what I know you do not have is a map that details the more geographically large area. All you know about this new cave system, these caverns of Postumia, is that they're not directly here, which means you're going to have to find out where you have to go to get to them.
Now, if I'm reading this right, on Winkleman's diary from whenever it was, a few years before he died, he speaks of caverns at Adelsberg. And I'm kind of guessing that maybe this is the same place. I wonder, is Anton have a map of the general area somewhere here?
That's an interesting question. So how about we make a group luck roll?
Goodness gracious me, who's going to roll that?
Oh, no. I think someone's lower than me. I think Giles is.
So Simon, how much luck do you have?
I am at a whopping 15.
Ooh, wonderful. So before you roll, just make sure we have all of our items to bear potentially for something like this.
This is where you're going to play 3 negative hands of fate on me.
So the keeper is generally suggested to only keeper or storyteller. Keeper or storyteller is recommended to only play 1 hand of fate against one person at a time. To play multiple hands of fate against the same person in the same round would be sorely unfair. You might as well just kill them. So give me a luck roll, and we'll see if you can find anything.
That is a 3.
Oh, so it is. Fair enough. All right. So you've rolled a 3. You root around a little bit. You all do, I would imagine, once the idea gets in your head that, hey, we know that we're supposed to go to these caves, or we should probably look at them. We don't know where the hell they are. Let's root around here and see if this Russian guy has anything we can use. So you effectively toss his house for the better part of probably an hour, Simon, and anybody else that gets into it. And you find a map of the area that has some very strange markings on it. It's a strange map, only because it has marks on it that you don't recognize. They're written in a different language. The map is also in Russian.
Oh, splendid. What are these markings here? Is this Russian script? Cyrillic, is that what you call it? Does it look like the same kind of...
It does. You've encountered some Cyrillic before.
Well, we know that Anton had a Russian officer's uniform, so it's not too much of a stretch to assume that he's Russian.
It's not.
Right, well, let's see if we can figure this out, shall we? Here's the sea, here's the land. Do you think this is Trieste? I'm not sure how much this helps us, really.
It does seem to give you some rough geographic distance. So if you have natural world or track, I would allow a roll. Whichever is higher is perfectly fine.
I would love to roll for that if it's okay.
And this roll would be to determine the rough distance between Trieste and the caves, which you can see on the map because they are a geographic note here.
All right. Simon has a track of 30, but he has a natural world of 50 that he has not had a chance to use.
Natural world is perfectly fine by me.
And that's a 42 under 50.
All right. Anyone else?
Richard rolled 71 over 44.
I mean, I have a 28 in natural world, but I can give it a go. That's a 23.
Oh. So the two of you come to the same rough conclusion, and that is that it's probably a good day's walk from the house, give or take. Maybe more. And I'm not talking about just a simple walk. I'm talking about a walk over what seems to be some fairly difficult terrain. There does seem to be a train route that goes nearby. And so you might be able to find a train out of Trieste that goes to that area.
Well, if I'm reading this right, Simon, the caves are, what would you say, around 20 miles or so from Trieste? That's a fair hike.
It is, but it's nothing that you and I haven't done before.
Well, this is true, but...
it might be hard on Lady E or the Professor, of course.
Yes, indeed.
Miss Maggie will be fine.
And you, how are you feeling? You look like you're definitely recovering quite rapidly. Good to see.
I am, but I have a feeling I'll have this limp for quite a while.
Well, yes, and that's going to slow you down as well. I wonder if we should perhaps find some other mode of transport. Perhaps, I don't know. I wonder if there's someone around here we can hire a car or a horse and cart or something.
Yes, I was thinking a horse and carriage would be appropriate, wouldn't it? I mean, problem with trains is they're all a little bit stuck. I mean, if we could take the back roads, I think we'd be safer.
Yes, I'm not particularly keen on the notion of going into Trieste and waiting around for a train on the station platform.
I think a wagon or something might be good. I mean, we want to keep a low profile, correct?
So just by the rough estimate for both Simon and Mr. Fraser, it seems to be about 40 kilometers to get there.
It's 20 miles, yeah. I've looked on the map, so...
Yeah.
It's in real life. So.
Yes, me too. How far is this?
But obviously Fraser and Richard and her ladyship wouldn't think in kilometers.
Right. So that would also tell you, too, that it's likely not a venture you're going to make this evening, I would imagine. Or this afternoon. Unless you really want to be out of Trieste, in which case I won't stop you.
Well, here's a thought. Would it be worth this afternoon investigating to see if we can find some way of getting there, and then head off first light tomorrow morning?
I think that's a pretty smart idea. I wonder who should do it. You should not go into town.
Oh no, I wasn't thinking of going into town. I was thinking of seeing if there was another farm or a settlement or a house or something out here on the outskirts.
You can always track down that Italian cab driver that dropped you off at the cave. He owes you one.
I think he was in Trieste, though, wasn't he? I'll get hunting him down. So, just in terms of getting from Trieste to here, did we see any houses or any farms or anything like that?
There are some farms that you saw on the way south, and probably from the Anton's back door, you can probably see other houses, likely in the distance. It might be a place you can inquire about a horse and carriage, or if nothing else, a wagon with a horse you could strap to it and be about your business.
I mean, I would imagine that rural Italy would probably have a horse and cart for just kind of general farm work.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm more than happy to go, but I don't have any Italian, so it would seem foolish to just go by myself.
Quite. I don't suppose Anton has something like that here, do you think? He's a farmer.
Don't recall seeing a horse here, but...
No, I mean, I wonder if... it seems the sort of thing that would be useful on a farm. I wonder if he may, I don't know, leave it with the neighbouring farm for safekeeping whilst he's away. That would make sense.
You've not had a chance to check the entire grounds yet. Richard, you especially would remember from your late night run out of the house that there is a barn on the property here. It's not been checked, but you have not seen a horse here, that's for sure.
Yes, well, maybe we should check the barn if he may have left a horse there, and perhaps somebody comes to feed it on occasion. Maybe even gives it a quick ride.
Splendid idea. Excellent. Well, why don't you go and do that, and I'll put the kettle on.
Right, okay.
Good chap. I'll pat him on the shoulder firmly.
Maggie will offer to go with Richard, even though she realizes that if Anton left, he probably would have taken his horse with him on whatever journey he went on. She will still humor Richard by going along with him to look in a barn.
Okay. The two of you head out from Anton's house and take the walk. It's probably a good 3 or 4 minute walk just to get to the barn. There's a lot of farmland here. Neither one of you are farmers, of course, so you can't really make a great, we'll say, educated guess about what's being done to the land here. You don't see anything. You don't see any seed that has been sown yet in this land. So you're not terribly sure really what's being done.
Richard will point out all the points along the way that he was running that night. He'll sort of point out the hedge that he fell into, and
here's where I messed my pants up.
Yeah, that's it. That one with the thorns, you got to watch that one. That's particularly bad.
Okay. Here's you approach a rather rundown and rickety barn. It's the paint here has dimmed a little bit on the door, so it's sort of this faded red. The rest of the barn is unpainted, but the door seems to roll from left to right. There are a few hay bales that are out here, but they seem to be a bit broken down or in disrepair.
Well, I suppose we should look inside.
You see a cat come out from one of the windowsills, leap down to the ground, and then scurry off. It's a tabby. Nice coloring.
What a lovely cat.
So, Professor, you're going to open the door?
Yes.
You swing open the barn door. You have to roll it on its bracket here, but as you do, a couple of birds fly out of it. And you see here a large space. It's mostly open on both sides, running down. It's a little dim from the available late afternoon light that you have, but you can still see in the barn. And you see that there's a great big sort of half wall of hay that's been built up here in the barn. It must be 4 or 5 feet high. It's a little strange. It's not settled into the places that it should be.
Do you think that looks a little unusual? I'm back on my parents' farm. That just looks a little out of place.
Do you think Anton's hiding something out here?
That old devil, it wouldn't surprise me. Should we take a look?
Maggie gets this gleeful grin on her face.
All right. So if you're going to search the barn, I guess there's 2 things that I'd like. One, I'd like to know how you're searching. And then 2, at the end of your explanation as to how, you can give me, we'll say, a hard spot hidden roll.
Probably look around all the corners, rifle through some hay, move some out of the way, try to get behind anything that looks like it might be hiding something. Is there a loft area? There is a loft area as well. Maggie'd pop up there.
Okay. And go ahead and give me a roll, Miss Bellinger.
This is spot hidden, right?
It is indeed spot hidden.
Ooh, that is a 73 over 48.
All right.
It's dark in here.
Would you care to push the roll?
I think I will because I'm very curious. And Anton seems like the kind of gentleman with a lot of juicy secrets. And being pointed out that things looked odd here. I do want to see a little extra if he has hidden anything. And so I might even push myself to look behind or climb up on or lift things that would normally be too heavy for me, or something that is just out of reach, or getting up on that extra rickety looking climbing apparatus.
Very well. I will remind you, of course, as your keeper, that failed push rolls are usually bad for the investigator.
I'm fully aware. I accept the risk.
Good.
And it's a 3 under 48.
My. So, Richard, you watch Miss Bellinger, Mags, as we call her locally, head up to the loft. And it's a pretty tall ladder. It must be 3 meters. She goes up fairly high. And without even the thought of a support for anyone holding the ladder or anything like that. And you watch this ladder dance on the floor as she goes up. And it's quite terrifying, actually, for you, because you don't want to see her fall.
Well, at quite some speed, Richard will sort of scoot over to the base of the ladder and he'll try and foot it so he can hold onto the ladder and put his feet on the bottom just to make sure it doesn't move, or to try and minimize the movement anyway.
Good man. You do so, and you feel the steadiness, Maggie, of someone holding the ladder, which, of course, Richard should have been doing at the beginning, but he's here finally. That's good. And you get up to the loft, and when you get up to the loft, you are greeted by an animal.
Greeted in a nice way, or?
Well, I mean, one could say so. So at the top of the loft, there is a little nesting area that's been made. It's no bigger than, say, half a meter across. And there's a hole there in the middle of this nest. And inside this little hole, this little space at the top of the loft, there are 6 tabby kittens sitting in the middle. And they look at you with these enormous sort of blue eyes that stare out at you, and they mew. And it's just also very wonderful for a moment.
Just for a moment?
Oh, yeah, just for a moment. Because your vantage gives you an amazing view over something that you wouldn't normally have seen had you not been up here. And so when you look back to, of course, say something to Richard that there are these beautiful kittens, you notice that a large portion of the barn, the lower section here that you walked over on, those boards are irregularly cut. So the floor itself of the barn isn't cut right. You don't see the boards line up at the same space. They're irregular, as if the barn was repaired, perhaps, in the past.
Richard, there's some adorable kittens up here.
Ah, lovely.
Oh,
what breed are they?
They're cats.
Cat, yes, lovely.
Maggie doesn't know much of cats.
Richard decides not to press it.
But Richard, I do see that it would appear at some point something's been repaired right over there. The boards are different.
Oh! And Richard looks at his feet. Yes, I see. That's most unusual. Well, come on down, then we should investigate this.
Maggie, something fuzzy nuzzles your arm, like right at your hand.
Oh. And Maggie goes, pss, 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 pss.
It mews.
Makes little purring noises.
And then the next one comes out, and you see a couple of them try to sort of on stubby legs make their way to you. All of them mew, desperate for attention, and probably...
Yes, your mother will be back for you soon. I just popped out. Okay, go back to your nest. I'm like trying to usher kittens back into the nest.
Okay.
Before I hurry down.
I will just say that as even though they're kittens, they are cats, and therefore they don't pay any attention to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They do whatever they want, which is to come see this new person. But they're not going to venture down, as far as you know. They're not going to venture down the ladder.
Yeah.
As far as you know. And so if you begin to make your way down the ladder, Richard, are you still steadying her as she's coming down?
Yes, Richard will be steadying the ladder.
All right. So, Miss Bellinger, you get down without incident, and you can hear the cat mewing from up top.
Yes, little kitten, your parent will be back soon. What do you think, Richard? Should we pry up these floorboards?
Oh, I think we should. Aren't you curious?
Well, we've already wrecked the man's house. We might as well wreck his shed as well.
Well, I wouldn't say we've demolished the house. We've, I don't know, it just looks a little more lived in than it did before.
Maggie's thinking back to a voice in her head saying, you tossed the house, and then also some other voices in her head talking about taking everything off of his Russian officer's jacket and wearing it around.
So if you're going to, we'll say, toss the barn, as it were, specifically in the floorboards, you pull up and pry up 3 or 4 floorboards. It takes you quite a bit of time. It probably takes you a good half an hour. But it is not without merit. So beneath this barn is something rather stupendous. Beneath it, covered in strands of hay and grasses, there is a beautiful black automobile.
Well, that certainly beats a horse.
Why would he leave this under a barn, though?
I don't know. How on earth are we going to get it out?
Perhaps he committed a crime in this thing.
So to that end, to that question, Professor, you can see where there were boards that were lowered into the barn. You can see the rub marks on those irregular portions where they put some of these boards, shorter boards, down in here, so that way the car could be pushed or driven down.
Look, there's some, I do believe if we get some planks, we could, put them in front and drive it up. Can you drive, Maggie?
Oh, I've driven a time or two in my life.
Excellent. Well, shall we, I'm gonna, and Richard just sort of starts flapping and moving boards.
Maggie will hop in the car.
Okay, so Miss Bellinger, why don't you give me a spot hidden roll again?
Okay. This is once again a 3 under 48.
Holy moly. All right. So you hop in the driver's seat?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's very comfortable. The leather in here is very well appointed. You sort of squeak a little bit as you sit down in the leather seat. And you look around and see the gears and the wheel and whatnot, and handles, levers, etc. And you realize that on the back seat, which is rather plush actually, there seem to be some holes in the upholstery. And then you notice another hole in where the back window is supposed to be.
Yes, Maggie is not shocked by this because there really is not a lot of reasons why a man would hide a car under a barn, other than that it was used to commit a crime. But we'll be driving at night, so I'm sure no one will notice.
Surely.
I'll wait till we get it out before I point it out to Richard.
Okay, so I'd like to know, what's your drive auto, Maggie?
Maggie's drive auto is 40.
Well,
I know.
give us a roll then.
I've driven a time or two. It's a 29 under 40.
Fantastic. So, Richard, you have to bail out of the way. Because as soon as Miss Bellinger has this auto prepared and ready to go, she floors it. And you go straight up out of the depths of this barn, and you sort of stop just short enough of the big bales that are in the way. And you're able to get it to brake.
I say there, good sir. Could you use a ride today?
I do believe I could. And Richard will open the door and get in.
Yeah, you feel like 1,000,000 pounds in this thing. This is quite the automobile. There's also something at your feet, Richard. Like when you get in, you step on something.
Well, a case, so Richard will have a look.
There's a case there. It's almost a small valise case. It's no bigger than a bread box.
Well, Richard couldn't possibly imagine there would be anything unusual or wrong with it, so of course he'd open it.
Certainly, you open it up, and when you open it up, you see that there is, oh boy, that's a rather large pistol. And there's a knife there as well. That's a hunting knife.
Well, these may come in useful. I'm not what I expected to see in Anton's car, but yes, these could come in useful.
I couldn't help but notice, Richard, how Anton has elected to decorate the back seat. And I will gesture towards the holes.
Yes, he's been busy, for sure.
It does seem that way, yes.
Just remnants of a past life, I'm sure.
I hope there's not remnants of anybody else in here, but yes, quite.
Shall we show the others what we found?
If we must, I guess we can't go alone, can we, to the caves? I wonder where on earth we are.
I want Maggie to kind of drive up to the house and honk the horn.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, you can't not do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And so those of you in the house hear an automobile approaching the house, which is a definitive noise for sure.
Douse the lights quickly.
The lights go out in the house.
Maggie
I
would
get
probably be
my
laughing.
revolver and stand by the window and peer out through the window.
Mr. Fraser, you see an auto appear near the house. Like its headlight lamps are on and it's coming toward the house. Unfortunately, it's coming from the fields. You don't know why there is an automobile approaching the house from the fields. This is highly irregular.
I think the black shirts must be onto us. Simon, he armed. Somebody go and get Richard and Maggie.
I'm armed, and the rifle's still out from when I assembled it for Maggie. Yeah, we have that in range.
So, Maggie, you're stopping in front of the house?
Yes, and honking.
Okay. Yeah, the horn's on. All of you are hearing that.
What the hell are they doing?
Well, perhaps we should go see.
Wait. I'm sure they'll come out in a moment. Kind of watch this car. Is the engine still running? They're just sitting there with the lights on.
I'm just going outside.
Your ladyship, don't be careful. Don't. We don't know who it is. They might shoot first and ask questions later.
Maggie will shave it a haircut.
That kind of repetitious horn blowing sounds very American to me, so off I go. I just march out the front door.
Okay.
Your ladyship...
It's the kind of rude thing I can only think of an American doing, so I'm fairly convinced it's Maggie.
I'm certain our American audience appreciates that.
So Mr. Fraser tries in vain to stop her from marching out through the front door, but I will be right behind her with my weapon in hand.
Yeah, you try to stop her, and it does not work. As all the other times you've experienced anything with Lady Elizabeth, when she wants to do something, you're simply just unprepared to stop her. So you march out of the house, Lady Elizabeth, and you see an idling automobile. Behind it, behind the wheel, rightly so, is one Miss Margaret Bellinger. And somehow she seems to have acquired an automobile.
Mr. Fraser, it's Miss Bellinger. It's quite fine. I told you so.
I see, your ladyship, but I mean, really, that was very if you don't mind me saying so, that was very reckless of you. We didn't know who it was. It could have been anyone. This is very dangerous times.
Not very many members of polite European society would be blasting the horn so late in the afternoon, right outside a house. I was quite certain, therefore, it was Miss Bellinger.
Well, if you say so, your ladyship, I'm just glad everything turned out all right.
We found a vehicle. We can just drive to the caves now. Anton had it hidden under the barn.
Oh, that's not ominous at all.
No, what's ominous is the bullet holes in the back.
He does seem to have been busy.
Quite. Well, we can deal with the ramifications of that later, I think. We have work to do.
Yes, and I figure if we're traveling by mostly after dark, no one will even notice.
Let's have a look at what does the fuel gauge say? Have we much petrol in it?
I think it says fuel.
Just kind of, Mr. Fraser just looks at you. and you think, for some reason, of a small Peruvian bear.
If you're going to do any sort of mechanical inspection on it, I won't make you roll. The gauge is right there. It looks like it has about half a tank of petrol, given where the gauge sits at. But for those of you who have had any interaction, especially you, Miss Bellinger, have any interaction with automobiles, obviously with a drive auto of 40, you know vehicles a lot better than probably most people here.
Mm-hmm.
This is an exceptional vehicle to find, and it's really out of place as to why you would find something like this. This is only maybe a year or two old at most.
What make is it?
It's a Fiat.
Sorry. Okay.
So just by looking at it, it's made by Fiat. You might know, Miss Bellinger, that it has a straight six engine in it. So it's got a fairly powerful engine as far as of the day. And top speed could be something probably 70, maybe even 80 miles an hour.
Oh, don't worry. We'll find out.
I'm sure you will.
Maggie drives it like she stole it. Because we technically are stealing it.
Oh, are you?
Well, borrowing, I guess.
I hope so.
Unless something happens to it in which we cannot return it. In that case, it was more stealing than borrowing.
You now have a conveyance. It will comfortably seat a few people. So there is both a front seat and a back seat, which is nice. And it appears, anyway, that there's a top for weather. And you might even be able to stick some items in the trunk in the back. But obviously, it would not be able to hold like everyone's trunks and traveling items. But it has enough of a trunk where you could put perhaps a picnic basket or a Thompson submachine gun.
On that note, Richard's going to look around the kitchen for a thermos flask, and if he can find one, he's going to make some nice tea for the journey.
If memory serves correctly, someone here got a thermos, didn't they? Yes, that's right. Yep. Mr. Griffith has one. And I think even, Mr. Fraser has one as well. They specifically inquired after them.
Well, yeah, I think get one for Simon. Maybe I got two, I can't remember.
I know there's at least one. And so you would have a vessel to transport such a warm beverage in.
In which case, Richard, I think we should pack for the journey. We should take a little food and some tea. Do you have that thermos? Marvelous invention.
You mean the vacuum flask? Yep, I have one.
Yes. Vacuum flask, of course.
So, Professor, that pistol that you found in the box is not anything like you've ever seen before.
Simon, do you recognize this at all? It's a gun of some description.
Simon will look at it, but he's not really familiar with Eastern Front makes, so...
Well, there is one thing that separates this pistol from a few of the normal pistols you've seen, at least carried around here. This is a magazine. So this is a blowback-operated semi-automatic pistol. And on the markings on it, you can see that it was designed by John Browning. And it was manufactured by... It looks like it's a Belgian gun. Players at home, it's an FN model 1910. And so it holds, depending upon the clip, which you seem to check as far as the magazine goes, this thing holds 8 rounds. You'd also know that this is likely a gun that was developed and used a lot in Yugoslavia. So just from the look of it, Simon, you can tell that this gun has seen work before. It was also put away without being cleaned. It should be cleaned before it's used.
It looks like it's a piece that's seen service, but yeah, I'm going to have to break that down and clean it before you can take it to the caves.
All right.
You don't want it to misfire on you, do you?
I'm English. I've very little experience of these things.
I thought most people...
Point and shoot, Mr. Courtney. Point and shoot.
I would think most people of your generation were quite familiar with shooting across the pond.
Well, no, not me personally, I'm afraid.
Oh, Mr. Courtney did not serve, Simon. I believe you were undergoing a far greater task for the war effort at the time. Was that not so, Richard? A far more important, vital piece of scientific work, was it not?
Yes, quite.
Aye.
You also found a what is effectively a hunting or a trench knife.
Richard will hand that over as well.
You're gonna hand that over as well. So this one is a little bit. It's a little bit strange. There's actually some sort of a engraving that's been done on the pommel, the base back end of this. It's a symbol you're not familiar with, Simon.
What does the symbol look like? And also, what is the balance on the piece?
This is not made for any sort of rifle. This is a boot knife. This is something that likely either an army officer or someone would have used as a concealed weapon in their boot, given a tall, we'll say just a taller boot. The balance is exceptionally good. And this knife is thoroughly clean.
Thank you, Professor. I was needing a replacement. This looks excellent.
I hope it serves its purpose.
Do any of the rest of us notice the engraving on the pommel?
Well, I mean, he's just given it to Simon, so I don't know if he's passing it around for people to play with or to look at, but if you are, that's fine.
I mean, Richard's just giving it to Simon. It's just a knife. It's not of any interest to him.
I mean, Simon's not hiding it. He is looking at the inscription, so anyone's welcome to look over his shoulder, so.
If you do, you can roll a cult.
What's that carved on that? Is that initials or something? I'm not even going to bother rolling a cult.
I rolled a 64 over 20, so I don't know what it is.
Yeah, this probably is just some tomfoolery.
Initials, surely it's...
I mean, am I close enough that I can see it?
I don't know how much... I mean, if you're paying attention to what's going on, sure. If not, then...
Well, I don't have anything else to do while I'm at the car waiting to leave. So...
You guys planning on leaving tonight, then?
Well, I thought that's what we were doing. That is a 16 on my occult. Under much higher than that, 67.
Lady Elizabeth, you see Simon looking at this knife and he's sort of passing it around a little bit, or at least making it visually available. He's not concealing it. Mr. Fraser takes a look at it and sort of squints his eyes and says, what's that? And then the symbol that you see on it, though, is something that does mean something to you. This is a Slavic symbol. I'm going to mangle the pronunciation for Mr. Quartermain because he'll appreciate that. This is Sventovit. And so if you remember correctly, which is the Slovak god of war. But he represents a connection between the waters of earth and the fires of heaven, which is a little strange for you. And the reason why this keys in on the strange part is that it's a symbol that is usually worn by women to protect them during pregnancy. And it can also be used by people who are going through a spiritual hardship or toil to offer them strength and perseverance. But you find it a little strange to see it amongst Anton's things. Obviously, it isn't likely that he's been pregnant that you know of, although stranger things, of course, have happened. But it does sort of perhaps speak to what you don't know about him. All of these things do now. And so when you start to play the mathematical add-up game, the what you don't know about him begins to grow immensely.
Well, that's very odd. I don't know why he has a symbol associated with a Slavic war god. It's usually pregnancy, but having never met the man, there's not a whole lot I can say about that. Still, it is strange.
I think our Mr. Anton has something of a past, Your Ladyship. A very curious character, to be sure.
Well, aren't we all?
Look, I have a thought. Would it be wise to pack our belongings in the car, take them with us?
I don't think there's room for all of us, plus all our belongings. One of us would have to stay behind.
Maybe we could put them on the roof. I was thinking that if our visit to the caves goes well, then we could, I don't know, drive to the next station. It may be safe for them returning to Trieste.
I don't think that's a bad idea, Professor, but I'm not entirely sure that we can manage to fit everything onto the car. It might be easier if we leave our belongings here, perhaps, and then come back here after the caves.
Well, it does make a good point as well, because we also have Paul, and I don't think that we could fit Paul. So Paul could stay and watch after our stuff, and then when we're done, we can swing back to pick everything up if we need to. Or perhaps Paul could arrange for things to be delivered to a train.
Certainly. Takes a sip of tea. I'd be happy to.
Oh, splendid fellow.
Do you know I've been doing some baking in here?
Oh, I thought I smelled something.
Yes. When you're all ready, he turns back into the kitchen.
Crumpet, anyone?
Back out with some freshly baked bread. You've all got to be so terribly hungry. And you realize suddenly that you are.
I'm completely satiated after last night. I don't know about you people.
Mr. Fraser is getting increasingly worried about Lady Elizabeth. Her behavior is very odd. But
Paul adds that if you want to leave your stuff here, he can watch over it. And if you know a rough idea when you might be ready to get back on the train, I can make sure that your bags are ready for it.
That would be very nice, Paul. I'm not sure when we'll be back, but...
That's fair.
I'm going to quickly consult the travel guide, the timetable rather, to see how far it is to our next stop, to see whether driving there is a feasible option or whether we'd be better off just going back into Trieste and jumping back on the train there.
I think that is not a bad idea.
The next station is, and let me pronounce this correctly, Pogloriel Campagna.
Yeah, the next stop you'd be getting off at, though, is...
It's just less than an hour away, isn't it?
Yeah, but you have to read the schedule correctly.
Oh, okay.
So the next scheduled stop that you would have, that the party would be likely stopping based upon Dr. Smith's notes, would be Zagreb, maybe?
Could we not still hop on the train at one of these little stations? I mean, if it still stops there, we could hop on and then go to Zagreb after that. But
certainly you could. Yep, Zagreb, then Belgrade.
Would we not be stopping off at Munich? Is that not?
No, it's a different line. Do you see how the lines change on the left-hand side? It goes from... so everything gotcha. A, B goes all B to C there. And then if you're... The C line jumps all the way.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Soon enough, it'll be Constantinople. Soon enough. All right, then. So Paul just asks, are you traveling out tonight, then? To get an early jump, or sleep this off and then awaken in the morning early?
Well, I think if we are intending on catching the train at one of the nearby stations, either Trieste or the next station. That's going to be in the evening. So, 20 miles. This car roads won't be particularly great. I wouldn't say it'd take much more than an hour to get to the caves from here. Maybe a little more, depending on how bad the roads are. What time is it now?
Oh, by now it's probably 5.
Well, if we're wanting to head into the caves after they've closed up for the day, then now is probably as good a time as any to go, if we feel we're ready.
I think we should. I'm not keen on hanging around here any longer than we have to. They might find us.
And it is entirely possible that somebody saw the lights of a car here and heard the horn being sounded repeatedly.
If that's the case, we should probably go, Mr. Fraser, and not sit around talking about it.
I quite agree. I think I'm going to gather together what I would consider potentially useful items, blankets, if there's any first aid gear in the house, and any lanterns, spare lanterns.
Yeah, actually, interestingly enough, when Simon was making his way about the house looking for some sort of map, you would notice, Mr. Fraser, that he had uncovered an entire closet full of all sorts of interesting outdoorsman gear. And so there would be everything from outdoor blankets to a couple of extra lanterns, an entire box which has cooking supplies, like camp supplies. And so plates and two or three plates, and then it looks like a kettle made for a campfire.
I'm not sure that we'd be needing that kind of thing, but definitely the other. Is there a 10-foot pole anywhere?
Certainly. There are probably a few poles.
It might be useful, some implements like a hatchet, something like that. A crowbar would probably be quite useful.
I would say that there is an assortment of outdoorsman gear, which will have the following. So you might want to write it down. We'll have 3 poles, each about 10 feet long, that you could sort of pull out from the house. There'll be a hatchet. There will be a saw, and you'll get a small pickaxe, and then fire starting tools, a shovel. And then the last thing that you'll find amongst those things would be, there appear to be in this same area and same space, there appear to be jars, and they have what look like rations in them. So some type of, you'd be fairly familiar with rationed food from the war. This looks very similar to what you saw in France.
Like bully beef, some dry rations, that kind of thing. Is there any rope anywhere?
Yes, you do find some rope. That's about it.
This definitely looks like the back of a basic D&D character sheet right now. It really does.
All right. So if you're going to load up the car, you've got enough rope to rope things to it if you need, because obviously the poles will not fit in this small little trunk area. You can fit most of that stuff that you want to take in the trunk area, but there is a box that you could sort of take with to keep most of that stuff together, and you would just strap that and the poles to the car. And it will be we'll just say cozy ride for the group of you. But from all you've seen of the auto at this point, Mr. Fraser, it seems to be in fairly good shape.
Excellent. Mr. Fraser will suggest that he takes the passenger seat at the front, riding shotgun, so to speak, unless Simon would care to do so. And then he climbs in and sits down.
Simon is going to let Fraser take the front seat. He's going to sit in back with the Thompson across his lap underneath a blanket.
Simon seems more of a running board kind of a guy to me.
He does. Tend to agree with you. And there are running boards on this, and so if that had to be utilized, you would have to sort of hang on to the top as best you could. Wouldn't be impossible though. Any last requests before you take leave of the house? Paul does make sure that the But there's some fresh bread to go along with whatever you're bringing.
I'm assuming Lady Elizabeth is also in the back seat. And then is Richard sitting in the middle in the back or in the middle in the front?
I think he has to sit in the middle in the front. That's really the only space for him. Yeah.
Fraser can't sit in the back, so he's up front, which means it's Lady Ian Giles or Simon in the back.
There's probably 2 seats at the front with the handbrake and the gear stick in between them.
It looks like a bench seat.
It is bench, front, bench,
Is it
back.
a bench seat? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Professor Courtney is the monkey in the middle, as we would say locally here in the U.S. And then that'll be Fraser beside him to chaperone, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it would be highly inappropriate for Fraser to ride in the back of the vehicle, especially if her ladyship's in the back, so he has to sit up front.
He does. It's a law.
Absolutely.
So hopefully Maggie's used to the gear stick being at the front.
It will be quite comfortable inside that vehicle.
It does look like it, yeah.
But yeah, the gear lever there is actually on the floor.
On the...
It's a big stick that comes up from the floor.
So I have to reach between Richard's legs.
She will be reaching essentially into your lap to change gear,
Excellent.
which we'll be happy to get to at some point in the future. And on that note, I'm going to call this episode to a close. So thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Horror on the Orient Express. We greatly thank you for your listening ears. When we rejoin our Horror on the Orient Express crew, they will be blazing a trail to a series of caves, which they hope to investigate. Thank you and good night.